Horror novels. There's something very visceral about reading something on the page that scares the living daylights out of you, and then seeing an adaptation that takes your mind's worst fears and makes them a physical reality. Hey everyone, I'm Nick Hill with Shelf-Esteem, and these are my top 5 horror novels that should be adapted for the big or small screen. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick Hill with Shelf-Esteem. I'm a composer, now also a booktuber. You can find my music in The Wheel of Time, His Dark Materials, other book adaptations. And here I am to talk to you a little bit about horror novels. One of my favorite genres, as you can tell, I'm a massive Stephen King fan from the shelf back here. But I like reading other novels by other authors, and I'm going to talk about a few of them today. Authors that have wonderful novels that deserve to be adapted, because as I mentioned in the cold open, sometimes you can adapt it and do justice to what you feel in your headcanon when you read those books, but it also offers a unique opportunity to manifest the physicality of the horror and put that on screen. Before I start this, I want to caveat this. I'm actually choosing one book per author. So even though I am a massive Stephen King fan, I'm only going to choose one Stephen King book. Hence the top 5 list, okay? Because it's hard to do any longer than that without having some repeat authors on there. So without further ado, if you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. And leave it in the comments below. Let me know if you would want any of these adapted, or which are your favorite horror novels that you would love to see adapted for the big or small screen. Let's get on into it. So the first novel I want to talk to you about is one I read last year. It's called The Deep by Nick Cutter. Now, The Deep is a very interesting story. It's kind of got a little bit of The Abyss meets Event Horizon. If you've seen those two movies, pretty scary. It's about an expedition crew who goes down to some of the deepest parts of the ocean. It's very interesting. We explore so much of our planet, and yet we know very little about what lurks down below. When an expedition disappears, another expedition goes down after them to find out what could have happened. When you're down there, very deep, there's a lot of different factors at play. There's the unknown of what's outside. There is the feeling of being cut off from society and the isolationism that starts to play tricks with your mind. But are they tricks that are being played with your mind, or is there something deeper lurking beneath the surface? I think this would be visually very stunning to do. You could really have a contained kind of story that takes place really in one particular submarine. And yet you could have a lot of backstory of these characters, which the novel really brilliantly highlights, kind of makes you care about some of their familial relationships and motivations that kind of leads the main character down depths of the ocean. It's a psychological horror as much as it has the ability to play on existential dread that you feel throughout the novel that I think would translate really well on the screen. And also, when it starts to all go down, hit the fan, there are some pretty visceral, physical, scary things that happen. So I think that would be just such a great novel, and the ending, one that would stay with theater goers for a long time. So that is my first choice, The Deep by Nick Cutter. Have you read it? Let me know in the comments if you have. The second book I want to talk about is an epic, a 900-page behemoth that I think has as much scares as it has compelling characters. I'm talking about Robert McCammon's Swan Song. Now this is more about the evil that people do to each other and how society might devolve if a nuclear apocalypse happened. Of course, there's the casualties, the mass casualty event itself, but there's also the aftermath. What about the survivors, the people who are left? How would society evolve or devolve? Now, this book is often compared to The Stand. Maybe that's why it was also been a little bit harder to adapt. In my opinion, it's even better than The Stand. The characters are even more compelling. And I think you have these different factions of people, some that you expect to go the route of, exploring humanity's more ugly side, some people who might be the hope for humanity, and possibly a supernatural entity that kind of makes all this stuff hang in the balance. I think these themes of grief, of survival, blends a little horror, it blends a little fantasy, and it even blends a little coming of age, honestly, for some of these characters. Something that I feel like has been adapted really well in the past when you have that kind of a combination of genres. And also the book is just so well paced that if an adaptation came along that just kind of used the book as a primer and didn't go off and put their own spin on it, as you often see adaptations doing. I think this one would be something that is just fantastic. As a limited series, perhaps 8 episodes, I could totally see that happening. And I don't think that it would be a massive budget to do, because even though the scale is massive, really the VFX and things like that of the nuclear holocaust would be really that might be the most intensive. But after that, it's really more contained character stories as they journey across this landscape. So that would be my number 2 pick, Swan Song by Robert McCammon. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend you check it out. Again, it's the fastest 900 pages you will ever read. I guarantee it. The third book is by my main man, Stephen King. I had to choose one. It's hard to choose one because, frankly, a couple reasons. One, he's just a magnificent author, and there are a lot of different things that I would want to choose. And second, a lot of his things have been adapted. I think that's why he's maintained his hold on the pop culture lexicon, right? So it was hard to choose that one book, but if I had to choose one, it's a story about 2 characters, parallel lives, and how they diverge. It's a story about people coming of age, seeing a main character from when they're younger to when they get older. It makes you question death and what is the meaning of life and the pursuit of figuring it out, what it all means, and what does that cost someone. And that is Stephen King's Revival. It starts with a kid and a pastor and how their lives intertwined, with an ending that I know would leave audiences speechless. In fact, Mike Flanagan was supposed to be adapting this at once upon a time, and I think he was working with Netflix at the time. The studio wanted to change the ending for the sake of TV. Bad move. And of course, Mike Flanagan said, no way, I'm walking. So he walked. We lost Mike Flanagan doing that adaptation, which kind of sucks. But I'm glad he at least, stuck to his guns on that, because I think the ending is what makes everything that precedes it, have more impact, if that makes sense. And I think it is one that would make people question and turn the mirror upon themselves and think about, what does life really mean? And what is the cost of pursuing that question? There's themes of obsession and grief and kind of how to balance that fine line between obsession and insanity. So my number 3 pick would be Revival by Stephen King. If you have not read this book, this is probably one of the more underrated Stephen King books. Everyone who's read it unanimously heaps praise on it. But somehow it slipped on under the radar. I think it's because it's in Stephen King's Act 3, so to speak. I think it came out in 2010, 2011. So it's in the latter part of his career. And I think it's one of the last truly great Stephen King books that he's released. Fantastic book, so definitely check that one out. The fourth one might be a little out of left field. I always like to put one of those on there on these lists because, I think it's important to not just do the usual suspects. This one is called The Har by David Sodergren. This book came on my radar last year. I read it, and I was fascinated by the atmospheric horror of it. There is a community of elder people who live on this island. It's kind of a small town mystery with a little bit of a creeping dread. And basically there's a development company that wants to just bulldoze the whole thing and put up some sort of a housing development there. It's also the idea of getting old and how scary that must be. The fear of the unknown. What's after this? Is there anything after this? Reckoning with one's own mortality and also feeling like the world has passed you by. Now, it seems like all hope is lost for this community until one day a fog rolls in and something rolls in with it. I think this could be an A24 film. I just could see this confluence of gothic horror, atmospheric, and almost the absurd. Something that A24 is really, really good at doing. Beautifully written, and it is a short book, so I think it would work really well as a contained film. Again, smaller cast of characters, but the atmosphere of the setting and the landscape would be really interesting, and there's some more kind of body horror aspects to this that I think would translate really well on the screen. Have you read this one? Let me know in the comments as well. And the last one I want to mention is a book by an author named T. Kingfisher. Now, this is one I just read again last year. I thought the atmosphere was incredible. It's a little take on the fall of the House of Usher, using similar kinds of characters. Somebody goes to visit the Usher family and notices that they look considerably more worse for the wear. What happened that would make this sudden decline happen? Now, Alex Easton, the main character, kind of starts looking around the property and notices that there's some hairs that seem to be exhibiting odd behavior. There's also a lot of fungi around the area. What starts as a mystery kind of devolves into some grotesque body horror, and the atmosphere, the gothic atmosphere of this would make such a compelling film. Even a limited series, I could see you could draw the mystery of this place and kind of what has made these people take a turn for the worse and draw it out over 6 episodes, you know? I could see that as being a thing. The thing about this book that also separates it, I think, from other books that give it the creep factor and the atmosphere is also the character development is fantastic. You know, from Alex and Alex's kind of motivations for exploring the mystery behind this. It's kind of got a mishmash of classics like The Turn of the Screw. I forget the author's name. Also Annihilation, you know, the book and the movie. I think if you understand the atmosphere of those two, if you were to juxtaposition them against each other, kind of gives you an idea of what to expect. So I think this would translate just so well. So to me, these 5 are ones that are no-brainers, and it's kind of honestly surprising that they've not been either snatched up, their options have not been snatched up for adaptation, or that adaptations have stalled, because all of these don't seem like they would be, massive budgets to put together. But they all would be really compelling. So hopefully, next Halloween, we could look forward to some of these. I wish I could have some influence over it. I would be yelling it from the rooftops if I could, but what do you think about these 5? Are there any other ones you'd put on this list? Let me know in the comments, because I would love to chat with you. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. Thank you for being here. Hope you're enjoying spooky season, my friends, and happy reading. And if you haven't checked those books out, the links are in the description. In the meantime, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. I will see you on the next video. Take care.